If you smell this on the Appalachian Trail, you need to stop whatever you are doing and run. In June of 2018, deep inside the Appalachian Mountains, on one of the most hiked stretches of trail in the entire state of Virginia, a 29-year-old woman named Nancy Ewell set out alone for an 8.8-mile round trip to McAfee Knob. She had done the trail twice before. She had her gear, her water, her Garmin watch, and a mid-afternoon deadline. Nothing about the morning suggested it would be anything other than ordinary. It stopped being ordinary at mile marker 2.4 when she smelled something that had no business being on a mountain. Not pine, not creek water, not the salt and grime smell of a through hiker pushing through. Clean, laundry detergent, fabric softener. The specific synthetic warmth of clothes pulled out of a dryer in a climate-controlled room, hanging in the open air of the Appalachian Mountains at 87% humidity, 4 miles from the nearest road. By the time she reached the trailhead parking lot, she was sprinting. A forestry contractor in a primer gray Chevy saw her come out of the tree line and said later he couldn't decide if she was chasing something or being chased. The man in the linen suit was never identified. The tea set was never recovered. And when Nancy got home that night and unzipped her hiking pack, her trail clothes, the dirty, sweat-soaked gear she had packed at the trailhead, were already clean, already dry, already folded. And sitting on top of the pile was a silver spoon she had never touched. What you are about to hear is the account. Her name is Nancy Ewell, and this happened to her in the Appalachian Mountains in the summer of 2018. Nancy worked rotating shifts as an X-ray technician at Lewis Gale Medical Center in Salem, Virginia, fresh off 11 consecutive days without a full day off. Her trekking poles were $18 off Facebook Marketplace, the rubber worn through, wrapped in athletic tape where her palm landed every stride. She had moderate asthma, controlled, the kind that only becomes a problem when you stop respecting it. Her pulmonologist had told her that solo hiking above 3,000 feet wasn't something he'd encourage. She'd been arguing with that sentence since the parking lot, where she took 2 measured puffs from her albuterol inhaler, clipped it into her left hip pocket, and locked her car. She had a 4 p.m. shift to cover. A 3 p.m. hard stop at the trailhead. The clock started the moment her trail runners hit gravel. Below the ridgeline, the trail had its own sound. Wood thrushes running scales in the oaks, the hiss of her water bottle valve, her boot strike on packed gravel. 2 cars had been in the lot. She hadn't seen another hiker since the first switchback. By now, the trail should carry voices somewhere above. There was nothing. The morning was doing its job too quietly. By mile 1.5, she'd stopped thinking about it. Socks damp, sunscreen mixing with sweat, chest behaving. The woods smelled like loam and pine sap and something mineral from the creek crossing, a place that made sense. At mile 2.0, the trail rounded a ridge shoulder and the birds stopped. Not tapered, stopped, mid-phrase, cut at the board. She noticed. Then she didn't. Then, without deciding to, she reached down and checked her left hip pocket. The inhaler was there. She wasn't short of breath. She just needed to know where it was. That detail, the check, before the boulder, before the smell, before any of it, is the part I keep returning to. Like something in her had already started the math before her mind knew what it was calculating. Mile marker 2.4 was a quarter mile ahead. The boulder at mile marker 2.4 was waist-high, flat-topped, set back 2 feet from the trail's right shoulder. On it, a porcelain tea set, bone white with blue forget-me-nots painted along the rim. A cup upright in its saucer. A silver spoon laid across the rim at a precise diagonal angle. every element equidistant. No chip, no crack, no leaf debris from the canopy that should have been depositing material on any flat surface for weeks. Nancy stopped. Her brain filed it under TikTok's stunt before it filed it under anything else. She scanned the trees for a tripod, a phone mount. Somebody crouched behind a root ball waiting to post her reaction. Nothing moved. She crouched and checked the strip of wet soil at the trailside drainage, the natural mud seam where any boot would have left a mark coming off trail to reach the boulder. The ground was undisturbed. No recent prints. No prints at any depth. The soil was unbroken the way soil is when nothing has stood next to it, ever. She photographed it with her phone, straightened up. The arrangement bothered her in a way she couldn't file cleanly. The spoon in particular, angled across the rim at the same 35-degree diagonal she used when she marked lateral spine alignment on an imaging film. Her supervisor had drilled that angle into her first month at Lewis Gale. She registered it as a weird coincidence and kept moving. That is exactly what it was designed for her to do. The smell hit at the next switchback. Lavender, fabric softener, the warm, synthetic closeness of laundry pulled from a high-heat dryer cycle. Here, on an Appalachian ridgeline, in air so thick with humidity, the distant valley looked smeared. The smell was so specific and so wrong that her brain didn't process it as a smell at first. It processed it as an error. He was standing on the trail 20 yards ahead, perfectly still, facing uphill, as if he'd stopped mid-stride and simply never resumed. White linen suit, dress shoes, brown leather, the kind worn to a court date or a Sunday service, no pack, no water bottle, no trekking poles. Hands at his sides with a relaxed precision that looked practiced, not resting, placed. Nancy's first instinct was practical. This man was going to need help. Linen in 87% humidity and dress shoes on Appalachian rock was a medical event in progress. She called out. He turned. The motion was geometrically correct. Head, then shoulders, then hips. The way a figure on a music box completes its rotation. His face was pleasant, not friendly. Pleasant. She registered the difference without being able to name it. "Are you lost?" she asked. 4 full seconds of silence. "No," he said. "Are you?" His voice was warm. The wrong kind of warm. The warmth of a recorded message calibrated to sound human. She gave him a wide berth on the uphill side of the trail and kept moving. She had a 3 p.m. deadline and a co-worker counting on her. At 3 feet of clearance, she should have smelled him. Sunscreen. DEET. At minimum, the baseline human signature of a body that had been exerting itself on a mountain in June. She smelled nothing. The air around him was neutral in a way that wasn't clean. It was absent, the way a room smells when nothing has been living in it. She'd covered 40 feet of trail when the thought arrived fully formed. She hadn't heard his footsteps. Not on the gravel approaching the switchback. Not on the exposed root and rock section she'd just climbed. She turned once. He was still at the switchback, facing uphill, watching her ascend. She turned back and hiked faster. The lavender smell thinned as she put distance between them. She told herself it was a dryer sheet packed into someone's trail bag. Fabric softener clings. She'd read that somewhere. She told herself the ground around the boulder had been hardpack she'd misread in the shadows. The man was probably fine. She was still doing the math on all 3 when the smell came back. Stronger and closer. The rocky outcrop below McAfee Knob's summit ledge was where the ridge opened and the valley wind hit the trail face on. Nancy reached it breathing harder than the grade warranted. Not her lungs, not yet, but something adjacent to them. Something that had been quietly drawing on her reserves since the switchback. The smell was already there when she arrived. Lavender, synthetic. The warm, sealed room closeness of a dryer running in a house with the windows shut. On an exposed Appalachian ridge in June, with valley wind hitting her chest full force, the smell had no mechanism for being there. It was not carried on the air. It was simply present, the way a sound is present when it is coming from inside the room you are standing in. Her left palm was wet, colder than sweat, and the grip of her trekking pole slid a quarter-inch in her fist before she tightened it. Her chest did the thing it did before an episode, a subtle narrowing, the sensation of breathing through a slightly smaller diameter. Not panic. She knew the difference between panic and asthma. This was asthma. Her body's logical response to stress her lungs had no framework for processing. She reached for her left hip pocket. The zipper was open. The inhaler was gone. She checked every pocket in the order she always checked: hip, thigh, chest, back, with the focused economy of someone who reads imaging results for a living and is trained to locate exactly what she came to find. It was not in any of them. The hip pocket zipper was open. She did not remember opening it. The math arrived before she finished checking the last pocket. McAfee Knob summit to the fire road, 0.6 miles. Fire road to the trailhead, 3.8 miles. Onset to incapacitation on a moderate asthma attack at elevation without a bronchodilator. She had seen the imaging of what that looks like inside a chest. She knew the number. She did not say it out loud. She looked back down the trail. He was 60 yards below her, standing still on the same section of trail she had been climbing for the last 25 minutes. There was no version of normal movement, no pace, no shortcut, no switchback geometry that put him in that exact relative position unless he had been maintaining the distance deliberately. Not following, maintaining. The distinction felt important, and she couldn't explain why. She looked at him the way she looked at an imaging result that didn't match the clinical presentation. Clinically, without flinching. No wrinkles at the elbows of the jacket, none at the knees. A man on an Appalachian Trail in dress shoes for at minimum an hour, and the linen fit like it came off a hanger 90 seconds ago. She knew what a body does to fabric over time and distance. He was not doing it. The lavender smell was at her left ear, not in front of her, not carried on the ridge wind. At her left ear, intimate and specific, the way a smell is when its source is close enough to touch. She turned. The rocky outcrop, the scrub oak, the hard blue sky over the valley. Nothing there. His voice came from 60 yards below, calm and carrying perfectly on the ridge wind. "You're very far from the others, aren't you?" Her decision, not back down toward him, not toward the inhaler somewhere on the trail behind her. Uphill, toward the summit. She believed, the belief was immediate and completely wrong, that McAfee Knob had an emergency call station at the overlook. The call station was at the trailhead, 4.4 miles below. She would not discover this until she was already committed, her chest tightening 1 careful degree at a time. She turned uphill and moved. Behind her, 60 yards down, he had still not blinked. She hadn't counted this time. She didn't need to. She could feel it the way you feel someone reading over your shoulder. A quality of attention with no regard for the ordinary rules of looking. The summit ledge was a 1/4 mile ahead. The smell moved with her. McAfee Knob on a Saturday in June should have people on it. Day hikers who drove up from Roanoke to eat lunch on a rock ledge 3,197 feet over the Catawba Valley. Ziploc bags, water bottle threads, voices on the wind. Nancy heard none of it. She heard the wind and her own breathing and nothing else. The ledge came into view empty the way a room is empty when everyone in it heard something and left. She crossed onto the overlook rock. The valley opened below her, a hard blue June sky over farmland stretching south toward Roanoke. Under any other circumstances, it would have stopped her. She was scanning for the emergency call box, moving toward the far end, checking the rock face, the trail marker post, the scrub brush at the perimeter. No call box, no sign of one. The wind off the valley hit her full in the chest. Clean air, limestone, the faint chemical smell of farmland far below, and underneath it, threaded through it, constant and nauseating in its wrongness, lavender, fabric softener, the sealed room warmth. On an open summit with a 400-foot drop at her back and nothing between her and the sky, the smell was still there, specific as a hand on her shoulder. Her chest had moved from a narrowing to something tighter. Not an attack. The early territory of one. He stepped onto the overlook behind her. She had not heard him on the approach trail. Not boot on rock, not the shift of gravel, not the specific sound dress shoes make on the exposed sandstone that forms McAfee Knob's cap. He was simply there, 20 yards behind her, walking at the pace of someone moving through a hotel lobby, unhurried, certain of the destination. He tilted his head, 12 degrees, the same angle as before, as if the number had been selected and saved. "You're very far from the others," he said again. Not a question this time. His voice was warm, patient, the warmth of a thing that has learned to sound like it has feelings and has been practicing long enough to nearly get it right. The overlook ledge dropped away behind her. He was between her and the trail, 20 yards of flat summit rock, and he was closing it at that lobby pace, unbothered by wind strong enough to shift Nancy's footing. She went left. Not running, her chest wouldn't take it, but the controlled scramble of someone who works with physical variables for a living and has identified which one to manage first. Off the main overlook onto the rough side path along the ridge face, the one the signs warned against. Uneven rock, exposed roots, a path that would punish dress shoes. 40 yards. She turned. Same distance behind her, same pace. The dress shoes on Appalachian sandstone made no sound she could detect. 60 yards, same distance. The lavender smell was at her left ear regardless of wind direction, regardless of speed, as if it had stopped being a smell and attached itself to her specifically. Her knee hit rock. Kneecap on granite, sharp and immediate, her palm scraping down. She was up before she'd registered it, moving. The inhale caught in her chest wrong, and she forced it through. One controlled breath, the technique Dr. Osei had shown her. The one she'd argued was unnecessary. She was not arguing now. The scrub oak broke open onto packed gravel, a fire road, the unmapped forestry access that cuts across Catawba Mountain near the Knob, not on any hiking app she'd ever seen. She hit it moving. A truck at the pull-off, primer gray Chevy, cracked side mirror, no front plate, chainsaw rig in the bed, engine idling. The contractor saw her come out of the tree line. He told a friend later it was the way she moved. Not scared, he said. Past scared. Like someone who had already finished being afraid and moved on to the next problem. She got in. She said she'd turned her ankle. As the truck pulled onto the road, she looked through the passenger window at the tree line. He was standing at the edge. White linen, not a wrinkle on it. One hand raised in a small, precise wave, the gesture of someone seeing a guest to the door. The truck moved. The smell stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The moment the door closed, like a switch thrown in a room she was no longer standing in. She did not look away from the mirror until the tree line disappeared around the bend. The spot where he had been standing was already empty. Not gone, Empty. The way the ground around the boulder had been empty of footprints, as if nothing had been there to leave a mark. Nancy filed a report from the hospital parking lot at 3:58 p.m., 2 minutes before her shift, because she was the kind of person who did what she said she would do even with her knee bleeding through the compression bandage. The park service ranger who took the call listened without interrupting. When she described the man, white linen, dress shoes, no pack, there was a pause. 4 seconds. She counted it because she had counted the same pause on the trail. "We'll look into it," he said. The file number he gave her did not appear in any public incident log for that date. She checked 6 months later under FOIA. The ranger's report existed. The physical description section, 3 lines, was redacted. Solid black. The only visible text was a single word written in the margin outside the redaction block. Again. She did not sleep. She cleaned her apartment instead, every surface methodically, the way she moved through an imaging suite. 3 rolls of paper towels, every counter, every windowsill, the top of the refrigerator. She was not thinking about the man. She was thinking about nothing. That was how she knew. She had run out of math. At 2 a.m., she went to put her trail clothes in the wash. She'd packed them dirty at the trailhead. Standard practice she never unpacked in the car. She unzipped the hiking bag. The clothes were folded, clean, dry. Not folded the way she folded, not the half-efficient roll she'd used since college, folded flat, creased, institutional, the way shirts arrive from a retail package, the way something folds laundry when it has studied what folding should look like and is being very careful to do it correctly. The laundry room smelled like lavender. She had not run a load in 2 days. On top of the folded clothes, the silver spoon, positioned at the same diagonal she'd noticed on the boulder at mile marker 2.4. She picked it up and opened her phone. She pulled the photo she'd taken on the trail and zoomed to the spoon in the frame. A hairline scratch along the inner bowl. A small pale arc, a manufacturing defect. She looked at the spoon in her hand. Same scratch, same arc, the same spoon, the one she had never touched. She scrolled back through her photos from the morning. She had looked at them a dozen times since getting home. In the photo from mile marker 2.4, the one she'd taken of the tea set, there was a shape at the tree line 30 yards behind the boulder. She had not noticed it any of the other times she'd looked. It was not the man in the suit. This shape was different, darker, taller than the surrounding scrub oak, not quite standing the way a person stands. Present at the edge of the frame at the exact moment she had stopped to photograph an empty tea set on a mossy boulder. She zoomed until the pixels dissolved. She stared at it in the silence of her apartment. Nancy still has the spoon. She keeps it in a Ziploc bag in her junk drawer, under a flashlight and some expired grocery coupons, the way you store something you cannot throw away, but cannot look at without cost. The inhaler turned up later in her car's center console, buttoned inside a pocket she never uses. She hasn't been back to the Appalachian Mountains, but she told me she thinks about that photo, the shape at the tree line, and wonders how many other cameras caught the same thing, sitting in strangers' camera rolls, filed under trees, waiting to be zoomed into. In these mountains, what you don't smell is sometimes louder than what you do.